All right, welcome back to another edition of HealthForce podcast. We will be doing a Q&A mailbag. We had another question come in that I would want to take some time to carve out here and give a great answer for. If you have not yet done so, go to our Facebook page, Ramsden Elite Fitness. Make sure to follow that page because we do post every Friday a fill-in-the-blank post where you're able to engage with us, engage with the community, and also it's your opportunity to get questions asked to us, which may be featured on a future episode of the HealthForce podcast. So we had a question come in from Christina M. The question is, should you continue to increase the amount of weight that you are lifting, or is there a point at which you should stay at the same weight and instead decide to increase reps? Thank you very much, Christina, for your question. This is a great question. This is something that is complex. It's not that complicated, but there is multiple factors to it. So let's work through this. The first thing I want to say about a question like this, a technical aspect of exercise, is that the answer is multiple. There are multiple ways to answer the question, and they're all correct. Fitness tends to be something that I think we make way more complicated than it needs to be. We're inundated with data and the latest, greatest diet, the latest, greatest exercise, the latest, greatest lifting technique, the latest, greatest high-intensity interval boot camp butt class. It tends to be nonstop that we are just bombarded with that this is the next best thing. And the truth of the matter is that those are all false, okay? Most of that is just fitness marketing. It's an emotional attempt to get you to buy their product or service. And so, of course, they're going to claim it's the best without really getting into the details. So what I wanted to say first off is there really isn't a wrong answer on how to progress your workouts. You are able to and or would be the answer. You are able to increase weight and or increase reps. Or the word I would use instead of increases is change. There are benefits at all rep ranges. I don't care if you're lifting in a rep range of 1 to 3 reps for an exercise or 15 to 20 or even 25 to 30. There are benefits to be had at every repetition range. So what we do at Ramsden Fitness is, in most people's programming, we will either rotate repetition ranges or it will be sprinkled in the same workout. So for instance, as an example, maybe it's workout A, you have 5 exercises, and there's 5 different rep ranges: 3 to 5, 5 to 8, 8 to 10, 12 to 15, 15 to 20. And for obviously when that happens, you are training for different things. When I was in college, they used to create this extremely strict sort of like they created these rep ranges that were like very specific to the outcome. So for instance, power and strength was a certain repetition range, hypertrophy or muscle size growth was its own range, and endurance was its own range. And that was in 2013 when I graduated college. So since then, I think we've got some good research to come out to show that you could actually still gain muscle size in a higher rep range, 15 to 20. It's not as strict as that. It's not like if you do 8 to 12 reps, that's muscle size. But as soon as you start doing 15, now you're not going to gain any muscle size. I do not believe that to be true based on the evidence that we have. So there are benefits to be had at all rep ranges, and they can cross over with certain things. I'm not suggesting in any way, shape, or form, however, if you're a power lifter, that by training strictly in the 15 to 20 range, that's somehow going to cross over into power. Those are on opposite ends of the spectrum. But again, once you start getting rep ranges that are close to one another, hypertrophy and endurance, I think there's some crossover there where you're going to get benefits of both. And again, the other thing that makes this a little more complex is the training techniques that you're deploying. There are endless amounts of exercise techniques, especially when it comes to weightlifting. Things like drop sets, extended sets, supersets, circuit training, German volume training. You can almost, again, it's endless the amount of things that you can add into a workout or ways to perform the exercise that actually completely can change the benefits that you're receiving. So first and foremost, the obvious answer that I want to give to everybody is that some exercise is better than no exercise. And again, I'm going to get into the specifics of this question, but I got to start off with something on a macro level so we can come to an understanding. what am I trying to say with that simple statement? That some exercise is better than no exercise. Well, no duh, Fran. I'm not looking to make a mind-blowing statement. What I'm trying to get at is, don't overcomplicate this, especially if you're somebody who will not do anything if they can't get their head around exercise. Structuring workouts is very difficult. What we do at Ramsey Fitness is essentially we're paid by our consumers and clients to do that workout programming for the client so that they don't have to do it. And obviously we have a greater knowledge base to pull from than the average client. So theoretically we're making, more efficient workouts, saving clients time and then giving them a sense of direction, and they can just focus on doing the workouts. That's really kind of our value trade, is we're just going to save you time and effort and just get you focused on doing and not so much about theorizing and constructing plans. I think when people start to think about what's the best technique, my fear automatically goes to, well, if a person can't figure it out, they're going to do nothing. If a person's sitting here saying, well, look, I read in a magazine that this is the best training style, but here's a company over here that's telling me that their workout's the best. I don't know what to do. And then they essentially have analysis paralysis and they do nothing. That would be obviously a mistake. So I had to start this podcast by telling you, doing something is always better than nothing. Okay, and I think 99% of people listening to this can understand that and agree and is ready to move on to the next point. The next answer is sort of ambiguous, but it's the truth. And that is, most of what you do exercise-wise isn't going to really matter that much. The biggest factor in your success for fitness is that you are doing something and you're being consistent at it. I've refined this over the last 5 years of our company to come up, using our data that we get from our client adherence, right? When we have clients that succeed, we have clients that fail, both in the short-term windows and the long-term windows. What I'm starting to look at and realize is that if a client is consistent, they have a much higher chance of success than somebody that starts and stops and starts and stops. It doesn't matter, again, what the exercises are. We've got people that are more fit than other individuals, but if they are inconsistent, the unfit individual will actually still achieve more success over time. So for me, that becomes the biggest thing, is that we just get people into doing something, and it doesn't actually matter all that much what they're doing. And I know that sounds pretty crazy, but if you're somebody that's doing circuit training, or you're somebody that's lifting just straight sets, maybe 3 sets of 10 on everything, does it matter if you switch it to a German volume style training or if you switch it to supersets? And the answer is no, not particularly. But within that, there is one nuance that I do want to draw attention to, is I am a believer of not doing the same thing. I am a believer, by looking at the data and research that we have to this point, that if you do the same thing, so if you're always doing 3 sets of 10, and you're doing the same exercises, there is a point at which you are going to plateau. Your body will adapt to that training style, and at a certain point you will have diminished returns on your workouts. So with that, we do change programming at Ramsey Fitness every 4 to 12 weeks for clientele. And again, it depends on their adherence and how much they're sticking to it. If people adhere more tightly than not adhere, then we're willing to change that faster. But it makes no sense that if we create, an 8-week program and you've done 2 of the 8 weeks, we're not going to change it at week 8. We're going to make you squeeze that lemon and get the lemonade out of it, and we're going to make you finish the program to our satisfaction before changing, because now we're just changing to change, and that don't make any sense. So, it really doesn't matter what you're doing, but you need to be changing what you're doing. How do you change a workout? That's a great question. And once again, you can certainly change technique, as I've already talked about. There's endless amounts of that. Changing exercises. That's a simple one. If you're doing 3 sets of 10, again, I'm just using this as an example, but if you're somebody that likes doing that repetition range, or that's just what you're currently doing, you're doing 3 sets of 10 for every exercise, change your exercises every 4 to 6 weeks. It's a good idea. If you're doing the same thing for months on end, again, you are going to hit that plateau button. So change the exercises. You can keep 3 to 10. You can change the repetition. ranges. So you can keep the same exercises, and now instead of doing 10, do 20, 3 sets of 20. You could change sets. I think that goes hand in hand with reps, obviously. So if you're doing 3 sets of 10, now all of a sudden you can do 2 sets of 20. You can do 4 sets of 6. Those are all factors, again, in which that you're able to change that I think provide benefit. Obviously, we already talked about, again, the techniques. That's what I tend to do. Right now, I'm living in an apartment here, so I just utilize the gym that's in the apartment. I do not go and pay for a gym. I think paying for a gym membership in 2019, it's still valuable if you're able to extract value out of it. But for a lot of people, they pay and don't go, so it becomes a really bad investment. And you can still accomplish your fitness goals working out at home, just in your living room with no equipment, following along a YouTube video, or again, if you have somebody construct you a plan that's based around body weight, you can still become successful, and you're saving yourself time because you're not having to go anywhere. So I just utilize the gym here, and there's not that much equipment. It's not a great gym, but I'm able to change up some of the techniques that I'm using because I'm not able to change necessarily the exercises. There's obviously, there's a plethora of exercises in the world. So I'm being a little facetious by saying, I can't change exercises, but they're really just dumbbells up to 50 pounds, which isn't that heavy here. And then there's a cable tower and a couple machines. So it's not, there's no barbells. So, my exercise, I'll say it this way, is limited. It's not bounded to, like 6, but it's definitely limited over what you get at a regular gym. But I just manipulate the other factors and variables in my workouts, and I'm still able to achieve success that way. So, maybe I go in there for 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks, and do supersets. And I'm just trying to do volume, and maybe I'm combining a bench press with push-ups, and I'm trying to do 20 reps of each, back to back, for 3 total rounds, move on to the next superset. Then I'll come back and maybe just hit straight sets, 3 sets of 8. Just bang on straight sets, really focus on getting a weight that maxes me out there at 8. And maybe I'll do that for 4 weeks. Then I'll come back and do something different, the next 4. I'm just constantly changing that about every 4 to 8 weeks. And for me, my limiting factor is boredom. If I become bored on a program, that tells me it's time to change. And that's a natural instinct for me because I can get on about 4 weeks of it, which is good. You don't necessarily want to be changing every day. You want to give yourself an opportunity to get better at certain exercises. So that would be, a beef I would have if somebody changes their workout every single day and just does something completely different. And maybe you're only bench pressing once a month. It becomes a little more difficult to get better at bench pressing. And so if that's a goal of yours, to become stronger and to progress in a certain exercise, it does need worked in there. A question an issue that I want to address is rep ranges in terms of selecting the proper weight, and how do you know what weight to pick for a certain rep range. So let's say the workout you're doing is 8 to 10 reps, okay? 8 to 10 reps for a certain exercise. Well, when you go to select a weight, you've got to be able to, on a minimal level, get 8 reps in a set. So if you're doing 3 sets of 8 and you select, let's just say 40-pound dumbbells for an exercise, and you do 8, you barely made it into that range. If you try to do number 9 and it failed, good, you got 8. It's in the range. That's a good weight. That is a good weight. You can continue that weight. And even if it does drop out of the range, I think that's okay. So if your second set, you come back and do 8 again. On your third set, you only do 5. Does it mean the next time you do that exercise for 8 to 10, you should select less weight? No, I don't think that. Okay. But what happens if you select the weight, and again, you're going for that range of 8 to 10, and you only get 5 reps on your first set? Then you've selected a weight that's too heavy. And I'm sorry if this seems elemental, but I think this is still crucial information for people that are not as well versed with training and understanding the relationship between a rep range and then selecting the weight. Here's one that I think most people make a mistake with, and that includes advanced lifters or those that do have experience with lifting, is on the other end of the range, the upper end. So I just talked about the lower end and what happens if you select a weight that's too heavy. Well, if you're going for a range of 8 to 10 and you select a weight, let's say it's 60 pounds, 60-pound dumbbells, and on your first set, you get 10, and on your second set, you get 10, and on your third set, you get 10. You 10, 10, 10. That is max reps for 3 sets. And the next time you do that exercise, and your rep range is 8 to 10, and if you select 60 pounds again, which you did last time, that is a mistake. Minor mistake, yes, okay, it ain't the end of the world, but I do believe you're leaving some progress out on the table, but by not selecting 65-pound dumbbells, because you already hit 10, 10, 10. So you're going to reasonably expect to do that again. I would challenge you to pick up 65s, And even if it goes 8-7-3 and it's dramatically harder, I think that there's more benefit to be had there in continuing to work at 65s until you do get 10-10-10, which happens over time. That is how progress is truly to be had. So yeah, if you're somebody that's been doing 3 sets of 10 and you just keep selecting the same weights and you're always getting 10-10-10 on everything, I do believe you are leaving progress on the table and therefore should either change the rep range or should change the weights you're using. So to swing this back now, after going on a little bit of a tirade here, to lay the groundwork and the foundation to give a really good answer. To answer Christina's question, when do you know when to increase your weight? If on your program or the workout that you're doing, if you are hitting the upper end of the range, if you're giving yourself 3 sets of 10, 3 sets of 12 to 15, whatever you're doing, if you're always hitting the upper range, 12, 12, 12, 15, 10, 10, if you're always hitting the max reps on all your sets, that would indicate time to increase the weight. That would indicate time to increase the weight. Or otherwise, again, I think you're heading down a path towards plateau. And again, it's not that the work is useless, but I just think you're just leaving it out on the tables. So that would indicate time to increase the weight. What about increasing reps? For me, increasing increasing reps is a lot less about performance than it is programming. So repetition ranges, just because you go 3 sets of 10, 10, 10 with a certain weight, doesn't mean that the next workout you come back and should say, well, I want to use the same weight, but I did 10, 10, 10. I'm going to do 3 sets of 15 and see if I can get it. That's not a mistake. I think that that's fair as well. You can certainly do that and say, well, hey, I'm going to do 3 sets of 15 today. And since I did 3 sets of 10 already with the 50-pound dumbbells, I'm going to see if I can do 3 sets of 15 with the 50s. That I think that's fine. That's fair and makes sense. But again, I view repetition, the repetition ranges that you select, I view that as something that you can alter in your programming, but you really can't. You can't necessarily program your weights that you're lifting because that's tied directly to the repetitions. I don't know if that's making sense. I'm trying to explain it in a way, and again, without visuals, and be able to show you, it's gonna be a little difficult. But I wouldn't let the weight that you're lifting dictate the repetition range. I would go the other way around. I would prescribe yourself the repetition range or follow the program with the repetition range and let that range guide how much weight you're lifting. And the only factor I would say about repetition ranges is that you should be rotating them so that you're hitting all. I think it's a big mistake. People do not rotate repetition ranges enough. There are plenty of people that go every day to the gym. Every week they're going consistently, but they've never done 4 sets of 20 reps. On every exercise. They've never done it. They've never bench pressed for 4 sets of 20. They're always doing 3 sets of 6 because they like to bench press heavy weight and they don't want to be the guy that goes up there and only puts 25s on each side and got to do 4 sets of 20. I understand, that's a mistake. I think that's a mistake. So, Christina, to answer your question, I would rotate your repetition ranges every 4 weeks or have the workouts rotate the repetition ranges within them. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to do the same reps for every exercise in a workout. It doesn't always need to be 3 sets of 10 for everything. A common thing that we do at Ramsley Fitness is the first 2 exercises might be heavier, 3 sets of like 6 to 8, and then we'll drop it off and go 2 sets of 15 on a lot of the accessory exercises. So the way you can think about this is bench press 3 sets of 8, incline dumbbell bench press 3 sets of 8, but then we do cable crossover 2 sets of 15, push-ups 2 sets of 15, and maybe bench dips 2 sets of 15. That's just an example, but that's how we try to rotate repetition ranges in there. And again, that doesn't mean that our bench press is only ever prescribed at 3 sets of 8. There will be times where we will either introduce different techniques where we are doing lightweight on the bench or even heavier sometimes, but we are constantly rotating all of these variables. That's the answer, is that we're always constantly rotating all the variables while also trying to make sure that we put them in enough consistently and constantly at certain repetition ranges so that people can progress on those. If you're changing your bench press every single week, right? If one week you come out and you bench for 10 reps, then you bench for 25, then you bench for 6, then you bench for 12, I still think that's fine, but I would want clients to get consistently better at something. So again, that's why my personal preference is just to have bench press. If we're going to do sets of 10, it's in there for 2 or 3 weeks, and that gives you an opportunity to progress on that exercise and get stronger, and then we can rotate it out. So again, this little podcast series by answering these Q&A mailbags, this is something that we're going to be doing consistently. And the way to get your question answered is to follow us on Facebook, and when we ask and present a topic where you can get a question asked, just go ahead and do it. Just participate. Take 6 seconds. Ask your question. If you're already listening to the podcast, then you have an opportunity again where your question could be featured. And I'd like to do ones where I give shorter answers and do multiples. That's something I think could be cool value. But there are also certain topics like this one where I want to deep dive it, get 20 minutes straight to the face, list out, really get into the weeds on the question so that I can give a really good answer. It's not just a 30-second riff on a topic that would be doing an injustice on. But again, social media is definitely the easiest way to get a hold of us. And even if you don't want to wait for a fill-in-the-blank question opportunity, just send a direct message on Facebook or Instagram. Yep, send a little direct message, a little private message, a little DM. Ask your question there and say, hey, this is for the mailbag, for the podcast. Here's the question. Boom, that's another way for us to accumulate that. So thank you for the question, Christina, and I hope that answers the question. If it does not, if it does not, just comment and say, what about this? Or even if people follow up now, just go ahead and ask that. I'd be happy to answer that as well.